most convenient lie I ever told myself was that being home physically was the same thing as being present with my family. Because to me, I wasn't disappearing in any obvious way. I wasn't hanging out at the bars. I wasn't constantly choosing friends over my own family. I was at the house. I was nearby. I was physically present. And for far too long, I thought that that mattered. I thought that that counted. But being in the house is not the same thing as being present in the life that's happening inside of it. Because I was close enough to see Esme, close enough to touch her, close enough to help. But mentally, I was somewhere else entirely. And I think in many ways, that may have made it worse. Because if I had been physically gone, the absence would have been a whole lot easier to name. But I was right there, and still not really there. Previously, I talked about how I managed to confuse task completion with partnership. I talked about how Esme would name a task and I would do the task, and I thought that that meant that I was being a good partner. But there's a deeper layer to that that I didn't understand at the time, and that's that I confused my physical location with presence. I thought that being home meant that I was with my family, but most of the time, work had followed me into the house. So even though I was present physically, I was thinking about the sales numbers, I was thinking about the meetings that I needed to set up, the metrics that I needed to hit. My body came home, but my mind was still at work. It never left. So even when I was sitting there, I was not really emotionally close to Esme or to my family. I just wasn't mentally available. I was not taking part in the life that I was working so hard to build for us. And looking back, I think I can see where all of this started. You know, Esme and I both grew up without a lot of money, especially Esme. She grew up very, very poor. So we had a lifetime of really understanding what it felt like to go without. And we just never wanted to feel that again. And we're not hunting after a luxurious life by any means. We're not extravagant Instagram life people who plan their trips around their posts. Our vacations are very mundane in many ways. They're family trips to do a half marathon or to go to another city to visit relatives. We just want a life where we don't have to worry about where the next meal is coming from. A life where a weekend trip to go see family doesn't threaten our ability to pay the mortgage. But all of this wasn't about security alone. I've always had this deep desire to serve. I don't fully know where it comes from, but I know that it has been deeply instilled in me since I was very young. So my desire to serve naturally became a desire to provide for my family. However, over time, my desire to provide became almost entirely financially focused. And that financial focus ended up consuming me for far too long. Because my overall goal was noble. Buy the house, build my career, increase the family income, take care of our family. I think I just really wanted to give Esme and the kids something that I could only have ever dreamed of. However, the way that I chased that goal ended up requiring me to sacrifice the very people that I was doing it for. I was trying to build a life for my family. However, I was disappearing from that life with them. And the unfortunate thing is that for a long time, that sacrifice seemed to work. The more I worked, the more my family moved forward. I gave more time to my career, and our life became more stable. And we did buy our house, the house that we live in now. And instead of that becoming the moment that I came back to my family when I hit that goal, it just became proof that the sacrifices that I was making was all worth it. And now the house was no longer the finish line. It just became another reason to keep going. Because we all know this truth. There's always another thing to provide. There's always another thing to spend money for. Another repair, another expense, another layer of comfort, another step towards a life that I thought I was supposed to be building. So I kept trading pieces of myself, my attention, my patience, my emotional availability, and ultimately my presence. And from inside my head, those were all things that was proving my love. Those sacrifices proved my love. But from Esme's perspective, she was just lonely. She lost her partner. And unfortunately, that loneliness is something that I just couldn't see from inside of my own justifications of the situation. Because I was working late. I was constantly traveling. And even when I was home, I wasn't really home. And she was right there, not 3 feet away from me. And from the outside, it looked like I was doing what a man should do because I was providing. I was working hard. I was helping around the house. I was taking care of business, as people say. But the real truth is that I had managed to reduce our partnership to two things: earn money and complete assignments. And that left Esme alone in this life that we were supposed to be sharing, the one that we were building together. So it's no surprise that the emotional cost to me was very big. I'm an anxious person by nature. People that know me personally know that I am rarely serious. I joke a lot, I laugh a lot, but underneath all of that, anxiety is just ever present in my life. And my job took all of the emotional energy that I had that I needed to fight back that anxiety. So by the time I did come home, there was very little left of me to give. And so my anxiety turned into irritation. My exhaustion turned into impatience. My family was getting the version of me that work had already depleted, had already drained the life out of. And that's a tough confession because I was doing the task, I was earning the money, I was providing. However, I was also being a fucking dick because I was tired. I was constantly short with my family. I was unavailable in far too many ways. And I think in many ways I was just checked out entirely because I had given so much of my humanity away in pursuit of money. And somebody has to pay the price for that. And in my situation, it was my family. It was Esme. And the last job that I worked, it really brought all of this to a head. There had been a leadership change that ended up leading to a pretty significant shift in culture. And all the bad parts of that job just got worse. And so, to no surprise, there was a lot more pressure. And on me, there was a substantially higher emotional cost. And of course, I just kept bringing all of that home with me. And I lost my peace. I lost my presence. I lost my ability to just be available for my family. And somewhere in that mess, trying to find some sanity, I ended up joining a men's group. For the first time, I found myself around men of a completely different caliber than myself. The conversations that they had were just completely different. They were reading books that are wildly challenging to my world perspective. They were talking about life in a much different way. And slowly, very painfully, I realized something. My life was an example of what every expert said wrong looked like. Because I worshiped money. I was absent at home. My anxiety was at an all-time high. That made me extremely frustrated. That frustration led to a lot of anger. It was all connected. But underneath all of it, one thing never changed. I never stopped loving Esme. I know I say that a lot, but it's true. I thought I was doing these things because I loved her, that sacrifice was for her. But I had to face the hard truth. My actions, regardless of my intentions, were hurting her. Even the ones that I thought were noble, even the ones that I thought were responsible, even the ones that I thought proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was a good husband. And once I saw that, once I understood that, I just couldn't unsee it. I knew that I had to change at that point. Not just my schedule, not a shift in careers, not my habits, me, fundamentally. The way that I was living had to shift. I had to sacrifice that version of myself that was built around money, built around anxiety, control, the relentless pursuit of achievement. I had to crucify that version of myself. Not because I hated me, but because I could not become the man that I was supposed to be while protecting the man who was constantly hurting and sacrificing his family. And for me, that's where the repair really started. And for a very long time, every time Esme invited me anywhere to go visit family, to do anything, my answer was almost always no. And I told myself that I was protecting my rest because I was tired of all the work stuff. But really, I was just protecting my absence. But then one day something shifted, and I don't really remember the exact invitation that changed it, but I do remember being invited somewhere and just saying yes on a whim. And that yes moved me out of my own head. It put me in a car with her, beside her, talking to her, present enough to realize how often I had not been present. And because I had been reading about presence and digital minimalism, I started trying to actually be there. No phone in my hand, no work calls to take, no disappearing mentally while my body stayed beside her. I just stayed with her. And once I felt that difference, I kept saying yes. Because one yes didn't fix anything. What mattered was the second yes, and the fifth, and the 10th, and the 100th. What mattered was that I kept saying yes until it stopped being a decision and started to become part of who I am. Over time, we started connecting again. And it was small things at first. Talking in the car became much easier. We started holding hands more. We started sitting together at dinner instead of eating separately. Our conversations were filled a lot more with laughter. We started really being together. And every one of those moments really started to root me back into what really mattered to me. Not as an idea, but as an experience. I think ultimately what I learned with all of this is that presence isn't proven by where my body is. It's revealed by where my attention goes. Because love isn't measured by how well I provide financially. It's measured by how present I am inside of this life that we're building together. And for me, that meant I had to stop being available and start being present. Not after work calmed down, not once I hit my next goal, now, in the room, at dinner, anytime she invited me somewhere, when she was carrying something that I hadn't bothered to notice. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that providing financially doesn't matter. It certainly does. Stability matters as well. But none of that can become a substitute for presence, real presence. My family did not just need the life I was trying to build for them. They needed me to be inside of that life with them. Not the exhausted, depleted, drained version after everything had been stripped away. Not the nearby version of me still trapped in work. All of me, my attention, my softness, my patience, my curiosity, my willingness to put all of that pressure to chase money aside and just be fully present with them in the life that we already had. So at the end of this, maybe the question isn't, am I home enough? Maybe the question really is, when I am home, where am I really? Am I with my spouse? Am I with my kids? Am I inside this life that we're building together? Or am I just nearby, still living somewhere else in my mind? I'll talk to y'all soon. Cheers.